Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and greetings from Dubai Quality Group. This year marks the 25th anniversary of Dubai Quality Group since its inception since 1994. It was set up by the Department of Economic Department under the patronage of His Highness Sheikh Ahmed bin Saeed Al Maktoum, Chairman, Dubai Airports President, Dubai Civil Aviation Authority Chairman and CEO of Emirates Group. Since its inception, Dubai Quality Group made sure that it was a platform to ensure the attenuation and the spread of quality, not only in Dubai, UAE, but also the region. Today, this afternoon, we are actually honored and we have the pleasure to have our Dr. Waddah Ghanem Al-Hashmi. Dr. Waddah Ghanem Al-Hashmi, Chairman at Energy Institute Middle East, Council Member at Energy Institute UK, and Senior Director of Sustainability, Operational and Business Excellence currently at ENOC, also Chairman Platform for Connect Leadership. Dr. Waddah academic competence has been exemplified through his achievement of Doctor of Business Administration, DBA in Bradford School of Management, University of Bradford, and also an MBA from Bradford School of Management, and B Engineering Honours in Environmental Engineering from the University of Wales College, Cardiff. Dr. Waddah, I've known him for some years, an interesting and gentleman. His passion is mainly in education, training and development, theological philosophy and translation, and also cooking. On the other side, if you look at his publications, he has international publications in the field of safety management. He has a book which is about, which is a comprehensive approach to developing a sustainable system. Books in learning, in operational excellence management, EHS practitioner's guide, in governance as well. And also a book about Al-Fatiha, the 7 repeated ones. Also a book in safety and process safety management. And I'm sure throughout the seminar, he will tell us also about the latest book that he is about to write, and also some articles also. Dr. Waddah, I think that was very little, really, not really representative of your self-presentation, but due to time, I think I had to just summarize these a few points. So the air is yours, Dr. Waddah.
Inshallah, thank you very much, Hassan. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alamin, salatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad ashraf al-mursalin. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, it is a great honor and to have been invited by the DQG to basically come today and share some thoughts really about improving safety in the supply chain through operational business excellence. So much of the challenges that I've had in my career in safety, in operational excellence, business excellence, with a lot of organizations has been the fact that, obviously it costs money, that you have to invest time into safety in order to improve your bottom line performance. The same thing with operational and business excellence. And I've made discussions in the past, with my brother Hassan regarding, for example, implementing operational excellence and how it really has an impact on business. So I thank him very much for his kind introduction. As you can see, I'm what they call an industrial academic or an academic industrialist. It depends, if I'm talking to academics, I tell them I'm an industrial academic. If I'm talking to industrialists, I tell them that I'm an academic industrialist. That way, they accept me. But the truth is that there's a lot of stuff, that there's a lot of knowledge out there, but that knowledge needs to be applied. Recently, I think in the last couple of months, Donald Trump, he signed a law which goes into effect immediately to say that the federal government is not going to be recruiting people anymore based on their qualifications and their academic certifications and things like that. That they would be doing skills tests and to make sure that people are actually skilled to do things. Because I think it's become very, very clear that sometimes in terms of performance and a real a predictor of performance of a person doesn't mean necessarily all these kind of nice certificates and stuff like that. I like to explore, I like to study, and I like to work. But I must say one thing, that whatever qualifications I've gained whilst I've been in full-time employment. So I never took time off to actually study. I studied and worked at the same time. And probably that helped me very much because it sort of gave me that both the perspectives of actually implementing the stuff that I was learning all the time. So today's presentation, inshallah, will be a practical one. And it'll talk about, I'll start off and talk about the safety transformation. And again, safety, HSE and stuff like that. A lot of organizations feel that, sometimes it's a waste of money, or a lot is spent and invested into safety and stuff like that, and that money is not recuperated. No, actually, improving safety improves your organizational reliability, improves your resilience, and improves your bottom line. But I also talk about operational and business excellence. This is an area of work that I've worked in the last 5 years mainly. I have a couple of books that I've done, co-authored with a few clever people, and we put some thoughts together. Today I'll be talking about a real summary of the 7 fundamentals of operationally excellent organizations, which is based on one of the books that we wrote. Inter-organizational collaboration, I'll speak about, an inter-industry collaboration. And I think especially today, because of COVID and the post-COVID world, I don't know even if we cannot say that we're in the post-COVID world, because we're still really in the COVID crisis, and a lot of countries in the world are still in lockdown or still having very, very serious challenges dealing with the illness. But one of the things that I believe will help organizations succeed is going to be collaboration. So leveraging on constructive disruption, because a lot of people, we've been talking about technology coming in, digitization coming in, low carbon economy coming in, younger people coming in, everything as a disruption to our industries. The truth is, it's just that the industries are going through evolution, and therefore I call it leveraging on constructive disruption. I'll talk a little bit about the 7 fundamentals of operational excellent organizations and the implications on safety. I'm going to try to go through these pretty fast. Obviously, later on, if people want to have a longer discussion, I'm going to leave some time for questions. And I know that we started slightly late, but I'll try to finish on time. If there's any questions, I'll leave 10 minutes for discussion, and then later on, even if you want to contact me, we can always have a further discussion if you like. So let me start with talking about the importance of industrialization and sort of industrial development. First of all, industrial development is really socioeconomic development. What we saw, for example, during the COVID crisis is this this social issues that we started facing, social inequalities, etc., really became very apparent very, very quickly. And it's because of the socioeconomic inequalities that we have in the world today. Just because it was a question of this crisis and a lot of lockdowns and stuff like that, that became magnified very, very quickly. A lot of things get magnified during times of crisis. But industry actually initially drove a great deal of the urbanization projects in the world. So, when we talk about the first industrial revolution, it really created a transformation in terms of urbanization in the world as we see it today. Also, what it was able to do, especially when we started going to the second industrial revolution, we started being able to scale that production. And as we started to scale that production, we were able to serve more people, and we were able to go into economies of scale, etc. It was the second industrial revolution. And then, obviously there's been big impact on energy, power, and water. And as we have been able to channel the water, get more energy, and that's why, obviously the oil industry, which I have worked with for the last 25 years, has flourished a lot, and power, has really helped nations sort of grow in their capacity. But in more recent years, we see this, onset of alternative energy, and why, renewables have become important. But this also created all these job markets. And today, although some job markets are dying or are temporarily been heavily affected, like hospitality, aviation, etc., some other new job markets are actually growing very, very fast. Before COVID, for example, I read in one article once that in the United States, there were must have been about a year and a half ago. They said that there was 100,000 job vacancies just in the States, just for cybersecurity people. That gap, grew so fast, it's unbelievable. So job markets are going to change, so primary and secondary industry obviously paved the way, as I said, for the tertiary and basically the services industry. And we see that, grew the third industrial revolution, and the computer and automation, really, especially after sort of the 1960s, started more and more communications, everything. And all these things really created a huge, big difference. So when we look at the last 150 years, the amount of innovation and change that's happened is equal, or if not more than all the time since time started, or since humanity started. It's quite a scary thought when you really think about it. How fast we've grown, because trying to estimate what's going to happen in the next 100 years, it's beyond imagination. But this information revolution, which was, a lot of the third industrial revolution was about the growth in information, and growth in the ability to share information and communicate that information. And in now more recently, so there was a lot of centralization, and the third industrial revolution was about centralization, building big buildings, building big offices, having people all coming there, centralization of power plants, centralization of manufacturing plants, Nowadays, we are starting to look at this revolution in distributed and non-asset-based economy. So people now don't want to own things anymore. People just want to rent and use as they move. So there are a lot of people I know, they don't own cars, they just use Uber all the time, or they don't own music, they just go on whatever networks and download it. They don't own movies, they don't buy CDs, because you've got Netflix and I don't know other kind of platforms. So we're moving to a non-asset-based economy, which is, as an environmentalist, I say this, that it's probably not such bad news, because obviously that means that it puts less stress on resources. So let's talk a little bit about safety and the safety transformation. And it's really safety is really moved, in my view, through the ranks of the organization to become a function in its own right. Maybe even up to about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, safety was not a function. Safety was part of technical, part of maintenance, part of, in some organizations, part of HR. When I look back at my career here in Enoch, at one time, and I think many of you will find it difficult to believe this, but I actually was reporting to the CFO, that's the Chief Finance Officer, as an HSC person. So it was greatly. It was a greatly it was an interesting experience to say the least. So it's moved also from procedural control to more compliance and governance. And now, really, people are starting to talk about safety as a business value element. So, what I'm going to try to say in this webinar is where it actually comes into the business value. We obviously develop, organizational cultures, and organizational culture development came with, safety culture. At first, many organizations saw them as two different things: safety culture and then organization culture. But then, when you look at it today, actually safety is part of the organizational culture. And companies that succeed, safety culture is part of the organizational culture. Safety also cuts through all the organizational functions, and it really forms a lot of the part of the conditions of modern legal agreements. We've seen today also interesting for a lot of HR people around. They've realized, a lot of HR people have realized that they really need to learn a lot about safety, and especially employee safety when it comes to employee safety, because of obvious reasons when it comes to protecting their employees from COVID and associated problems. So it's a shared value chain. So I want to now move on and talk a little bit about operational and business excellence and where they sit. Operational excellence is nothing but something that really brings together, like we see on the diagram here, people, process, networks, and technology. If you bring all these things together, you're able to create value, and that's what proper, effective operational excellence or business excellence systems necessarily need to do. They need to be able to create that value, and they do this by being able to execute this business strategy that you have in a very consistent and a very reliable and very resilient manner. And what operation excellence should result in is lower operational risk, lower operational cost. So lower operational risk means that you're carrying less risk, less chance of something going wrong, you're paying for it, less insurance cost, etc., etc. Lower operating cost is obviously a penny saved is a penny earned, Increased revenues relative to an organization's competitors, because you're doing things more effectively. You're producing whatever your can of baked beans or your whatever, the sandwich, or your barrel of oil, or your electrical cable, or whatever your business you're in a more effective way. So you'll get an increased revenue, obviously, compared to other organizations. You also create value for customers and shareholders. I was talking to a CEO recently of a very big supermarket chain during the time of the COVID, and I was talking to them about how did they survive and how did they do this. And they said, well, look, one of the things, the two focus areas that we had is basically our customer and our people. So looked at both those things, and they said, look, we're customer centric. We realize that our revenues come in from our customers, and during the COVID crisis, our challenge is to continue to serve our customers whilst maintaining the safety of our employees. And that's how we create value. We maintain market share. In fact, maybe in the future, we even create greater market share, because we were committed to our customer in our customer-centric philosophy, and we maintained our employees, who are our greatest asset. So business and operation excellence, there is a big focus on the customer expectation through long-term change in the organizational culture. And so it's not about, when you say event-based improvements, we're not talking about, oh, we've done an initiative and we've done something, and let's celebrate this and stuff like that. So today, and I want to say, happy birthday to DQG. It is an organization which I'm very proud of, because it's something that was built in the UAE, and it was built on solid foundations, and as we can see, is adding a lot of great value, and it has added great deal of value. And I think that Dubai and its competitive edge has something to do also with DQG doing a lot of things to improve operational business excellence within Dubai, and influencing a lot of organizations. But so let's define operational and business excellence a bit more. It's really under the umbrella of what we call holistic sustainability. It's how companies manage their processes systematically, defining really what they do, and and having a framework of processes and standards. Um, Having one single integrated management system in many cases reduces overlap. A lot of organizations, what's been happening is that over the years, ISO 9000 came in the early 90s, so they implemented ISO 9000, then ISO 14000, then OSHA's 18,000, then I don't know, ISO 31,000. And they kept on adding systems. The companies that have actually reintegrated these management systems have been more successful, and especially they put it under an operation business excellence, kind of framework, because you weren't doing a lot of repetition. There's a lot of similarities, especially in the plan, do, check, act, Denny cycle in many of these organizations. A lot of people ask me about ISO 45000. I currently sit to have the honor of representing the UAE in the International Technical Committee for ISO on 45,000. And really, it's very similar. They asked me, I said it's very similar to what you have in 9,000 and 14,000. It's a management system-based approach, but what was interesting about it is that it started talking more about the business context, and it put a lot more emphasis on leadership, which I'll come to in a minute. Operational discipline, doing things right and the right way every time. This is extremely important. I mean, I think operational excellence is all about having a management system. It's about making sure that the management system is there and people are actually implementing this all the time in the right way every time. And the behavior is posed by the organization, if you deal with people from a particular organization, in exhibiting those sort of corporate values. And so the behavior of the whole organization through its employees, through its customers, through its stakeholders, always is in support of the business and organization's mission. So this is a lot of good stuff, very difficult to implement. So let me talk about inter-organizational collaboration, because we're talking about supply chain, right? So and as I said, many of the organizations who have survived through the COVID and are going to survive, inshallah, through the COVID, are going to do this through collaboration. So inter-organizational collaboration is the internal look. So you have, setting these common minimum organizational operational standards for all the, sort of contractors and vendors that you have within the organization. Application of integrated, for example, purchasing specifications to ensure that safety and EHS standards. Many organizations have got, for example, green procurement. Green procurement really ensures that, what we're doing is we're really investing and greening the economy through our procurement processes. Ensuring supply chain integrity, also risk assessments that can focus on good business continuity management. And I think many organizations shall surely be relooking at their supply chain integrity in the coming months, years, because of post-COVID. Sorry. So setting performance contracts, which integrates operational, safety, and financial performance for people and performance is also very important. And within a framework of inter-organizational collaboration, this can be achieved. Creating also a lean organizational culture and maintaining high performance with low reliability. So if you recall a few slides ago, I was talking about how you can maintain competitive edge. So that competitive edge can work within collaborative culture. Inter-industry collaboration is also very important, because you work sometimes and I've worked in safety for many years, so even with our competitors, right, we set these industry standards and best practice in place, because it's all about saving people's lives and saving assets and the environment. And industry as a whole has an aspiration to become more reliable, more resistant or resilient and productive. And I tell you, for example, about 10 years ago, we had something called the Deepwater Horizon, which was the very bad oil spill incident that happened off the Gulf of Mexico. BP was obviously the oil company who was involved, Transocean, Halliburton, etc. but actually the impact on the industry was much, much greater than just on BP. So BP obviously suffered a lot, but the share price went down by about 46% overnight. In about 24 hours, if you were holding shares of BP, you lost nearly 50% of the value of your shares. It was quite a scary time. But the whole industry got impacted because everybody and every regulator went around telling them, listen, how can you tell us that the same thing cannot happen to you as a company working in the offshore environment in the concessions that we've given you? So the major industries rely on supply chains. So it's very important to remember that you are only as strong as your weakest link. So sometimes it's very, very important. In 2000 and I think it was in 2008, 2009, the German automotive industry ensured that they continued to support their suppliers because they realized that if their suppliers went down, their whole competitive edge and their ability to produce the best cars in the world, pure driving pleasure or ultimate driving machine and all that kind of business the whole industry was going to collapse if they didn't make sure that they had they kept the industry strong. So it was very important to maintain collaboration in the industry. I have to tell you, you can sort of trust me on this. Good safety is a good predictor of better performing organizations who are resilient and less likely to fail in delivering whatever they're delivering. If you're a restaurant or if you're a manufacturer or if you're a service a provider of any kind, good safety is a good predictor for better performance. And continual improvement happens industry-wide, really, rather than company-wide. Because if you look at, for example, the aviation sector, compared, for example, to the oil and gas sector that I work in, the aviation sector is a much, much more reliable, sector to work in. It's a very, very safe industry, really, when you look at the kind of things that can go wrong and the amount of things that they've done in terms of technology, in terms of training people, in terms of ergonomics, in terms of every kind of aspect, and the whole thinking regarding this industry. And all the industries, they came about and they sort of collaborated and they wanted to learn from this. And whenever there is a massive incident, they all share their resources, they all share their knowledge and stuff like that, and they come together to get better. So inter-industry collaboration, very important. So I spoke earlier on about disruption, and I said, well, there's a lot of disruption. Disruption can come from technology, has been able to help with, for example, communications, for example, through shared platforms, for example, sharing information, sharing data and stuff like that. Today, SAP, for example, if you have SAP, or which we're implementing at the moment, or any other of these platforms, you can share data just immediately in real time. You can improve the reliability in your sort of physical delivery systems. Training can be done much faster, undertaken much faster throughout the supply chain. I mean, only 5 years ago, if I was doing this presentation, I was invited by DQG. I would have come in and I would have probably given this presentation face to face with all of you. But today we're doing it online, and inshallah, it provides the same kind of impact. Costs can be reduced, and redundancy management, make sure that lean operations are there. So we need to engage with constructive disruption to try to really challenge the way that we're thinking and how we're doing things. Working towards shared goals also. Performance measures and KPIs can create better collaboration. But I think, I believe that KPIs without understanding the key result areas, without understanding what are the value drivers, without understanding what is your performance requirements, what is your overall aims of the organization and your values, can be misleading, because you really need to understand what underlies and what you're reading. When you're reading KPIs, what do these KPIs actually tell you? Better collaboration can create communities of practice. So there's disruption in terms of relationships because you're creating new things. Technology can be used also to prevent major incidents, as we have seen also in the aviation industry. A lot of the safety has come in because of technology. In saying that, of course, with the Max 8 or Max 10, whatever aircraft, the technology was the reason that those aircraft were falling out of the sky, and because the pilots were not maybe engaging and trying to understand that they were doing this and the aircraft was behaving in a different way, and if they had just gone into manual intervention, they could have maybe prevented those incidents from happening. So over reliance on technology can also have a problem. So I put that caveat. Technology can be used also to monitor many things in real time, so you're able to get real data on what you're doing. And if you're doing manufacturing, if you're doing oil and gas operations, it's very, very useful to have that. So let me talk, and I'll spend the next 10 minutes on quickly going through the 7, what we and my co-authors published in this book on the 7 fundamentals of operation excellence management systems. We'll talk about leadership commitment. We'll talk about identifying and executing applicable and relevant elements. We'll talk about establishing the baseline for your business, and then going ahead and closing the gaps, and then following the business management model and integration into the Plan, Do, Check, Act. Then auditing, and we'll talk about auditing and compliance, and the last one, which I really really love so much, is when we talk about the communities of practice. So fundamental, and I'll spend a bit more time on this than the others, because the others are pretty straightforward. Maybe many of you know a lot about it, but leadership is critical. Leadership is extremely important. It's very, very critical. Leaders have to create that shared vision. So if you want to do operation excellence, business excellence, you want to do anything, they have to, first of all, leaders have to create that shared vision within the organization. They have to have very, very strong capabilities in promoting the involvement, the consultation, participation of all the employees, through really driving them and motivating them towards that. They have to encourage creativity, innovation, and proactivity. And that's very fundamental to excellence and improvement, because if you don't continue to challenge yourself as you move forward, you can never really become better and exceptional. You always stay in the same place. They have a moral duty also, derived, which I think from being trustworthy, the competence, sense of fairness, and sincerity of purpose and personality, because they have to really drive this, and they have to be honest and with their communication. They have to lead through periods of change. So, like, for example, as I was telling, we are doing a case study at the moment for the CEO of a big retail chain, because during these periods of change, the challenges come. There's a lot of ambiguity. I mean, this guy or his organization had to deal with the government regulations changing every day about, do the customers need to wear gloves or masks? What's the temperature that they can work? What working hours? And it's very disruptive for your business, because you have 20, 30 different stores, and you have to maintain people, and you have to, make sure that people are going, and people are very worried. There's intense competition or high growth periods sometimes. This was exactly the opposite, but there's been high growth periods as well. You're going to deal with that, and you're going to lead there. You have to, I think, promote some intellectual stimulation, when you're dealing with individuals, because and each worker can come up with very good ideas. They have to take risks. In a lot of safety people that I've worked with, they don't understand this whole term of risk appetite. A business is there to create value. When you want to create value, you need to do something. When you do something, that means you have to take a risk. So you have to have a risk appetite, but your risk appetite needs to be within a framework which is reasonable in order to prevent any untoward things happening. But you have to have the ability and the willingness to take risk. In fact, boards of directors, they're supposed to push the CEO and his team to actually take risks, but within the framework. So if you have a good operational excellence, you have a solid operational excellence framework within your supply chain, you can really, really manage risks and maximize profit at the same time. Of course, leaders have to be culturally sensitive, especially when they're leading across cultures and international boundaries and borders and across supply chains. They have to build very, very strong teams whilst focusing on macro management as opposed to micromanagement. And I think that also, there's something about leaders that, they need to be charismatic and they need to motivate people by inspiring their hearts and minds, and not by leading by fear or leading by, people are not going to perform better because, they're scared. They're going to perform better when they're happy. They're just going to perform maybe more, or they see. And there's a very famous philosopher who once said, and never confuse movement with action. So fundamental to identification, of course, first of all, the first thing you need to do is you need to start looking at and identifying in your operation excellence management systems. And you operate under these three major elements, these three major categories: people elements, there's processes and system elements, and there's facilities and technology. And through these three, this is how you manage things. If those of you who are familiar with the ISO 55001 standard, which is on the asset integrity, you'll see a lot of stuff here talking about, asset integrity. You talk about, you talk about process, you talk about technology, and you talk about, and people actually come, or leadership sits right in the heart of this model. Then you have to establish a baseline. A colleague of mine spoke to me, an old guy that I used to work with actually more than 10 years ago, and he works now in Abu Dhabi in one of the companies, and he was telling me, Dr. Waddah, I wanted to ask you, we've just set up a safety committee here in this company, and I wanted to ask you about, how do you think we should go about, dealing with developing the safety culture? So I told him, I said, well, the first thing I'm going to tell you, I'm going to ask you is, where is your current position of your safety culture? Do you have a safety culture in the organization? And at what maturity level is it at? And he said, well, I don't know. I said, okay, well, that's the first thing you need to do. First of all, go find out where you sit and what your baseline, where you are. And then, inshallah, and then we'll talk about what strategy you need to go from A to B. Because if you're crawling, you cannot be expected to run. And a lot of leaders, because they don't understand this, they expect from their own companies and those in the supply chain that, you take somebody and you get them to tender and to bid. Yeah, they come in, they win because they're the lowest bidder, and they complied with all the paperwork and stuff like that. But they're actually crawling. Yeah. So instead of expecting them now to have a safety culture where they can walk from crawling, you're expecting them to run. And of course, they cannot run. They never run. And so the first thing to do is to understand where you sit. First of all, understand where you are. So you need to really look at, through your assessments, the adequacy of of the systems. Are they documented? Are there process procedures, etc.? Are people trained and competent? Is there enough competency assurance required in the procedures and the process and standards? Are these processes actually repeatable? Are they sustainable? And the workers really demonstrate that consistent use of the required processes and procedures and the standards and practices. And of course, assurance processes need to be in place, because if you cannot assess what you're doing in terms of verifying compliance and conformance, then it becomes very difficult. Of course, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, except that you probably realize, many of you who know and work within quality management systems, that this is actually two models in one. So you've got the people, the processing systems, and the facilities and technology around this. So I spoke about asset integrity management systems. So with the asset integrity management systems, people actually sit in the middle, and then you've got engineering and design on one side. You can use that, and some companies who have implemented operational excellence, which are hardcore kind of engineering type companies or oil and gas companies, they put people in the middle, and then they've got the engineering standards, the process and systems or design, and then you have the facilities and technology. In this diagram, fundamental 4, which is the management systems in the PDCA, is actually about driving those two aspects driving those two aspects together. So establish the objectives and the process required to deliver the results. Then you implement and compare actual performance with the planned targets and try to really understand and take the data. And that's why it's very important to have good analysis of data. And then you conduct root cause analysis for the gaps and then you close it. So it's quite simple, straightforward. And then fundamental 5 is the identification. So now you identify using auditing, and you can use different types of audit tools. Use a collaborative approach. I think that auditors are and auditing as a function should be a supportive function. It should not be a policing function. But it's very important that the competency of auditors, and I just want to say something about the competency of auditors here. It's not about the technical competency. When I was working as a sort of a technical auditor, I put a lot of emphasis on the behavioral aspects of the behavioral abilities of auditors, as much as I did for the competency of auditors technically, because an auditor can ask a question, can drive a lot of collaboration, a lot of good discussion with the auditee, and really help them improve, rather than talking to them as if he's doing a police investigation and trying to find some fault in what they do. So the knowledge of those involved as auditors and auditees is very, very important. Supply chain OE audits are really a very, very good way of collaborating and learning from each other, because you share across organizations things like this. There are generally 3 types of audits, obviously, in organizations. There are 3 levels. There's self-audit assessments. These are audits which are performed by the organization itself, and you have internal auditors, so sometimes called even first-party audits. Then we have second-party audits, and this is where the operation is audited by another part of the business. So sometimes the companies audit each other, or sometimes the corporate audits the daughter organization. And then there's third-party audits, which is external auditors, and these are more independent and important to evaluate really the degree of compliance or conformance of the organization. So these are the 3 types of. Then 6 is closing the gaps. I've seen many audits, very good audits, which taking place, but then organizations fail to be able to close those kind of gaps. So closing gaps, and generally one of the reasons that organizations fail is because the gap actually is actually because of another issue, but it's not been able to address by this department. So the maintenance department is not able to address this particular issue because they don't have the competency, or they don't have enough people, or something like that. And that's because HR didn't give them the right kind of people, or their recruitment process wasn't effective. And then actually later on, what happens is that maintenance department then has a safety incident as a consequence of this. So the gap really, the problem is manifested in a safety issue with a lack of competence or lack of leadership within maintenance, but actually it sits at the root with human resources, for example. It's just an example. So you have to really have a structured and strategic planned approach to closing the gap, and it's a very good opportunity really to collaborate. And when working on analyzing the gap and understanding this kind of risk of exposures, the right strategies can be used in order to help with the collaboration. When closing the gap, okay, we stop doing this operation, so there's an impact on our stakeholders. So how do we deal with the stakeholder, the impact assessment? Risk ranking of the identified gaps. You have to have a framework that you can work to, that you can all agree to, and rank the risks properly. And then close the gap by immediately, obviously those which are immediately dangerous to life and health, are our first priority. They should not be, should not be debated. And apply an opportunity matrix also to prioritize and close the gap. So be opportunistic with if you have the competencies in-house, or if you have a collaboration with particular consultant, or you have a particular skill in one of your partner companies, or upstream in your supply chain, etc. And then identify the exploiting of low hanging fruits, and the gap closure is also one way to start. So to give you an example, if you had a transport management system for your buses that they can take your employees back and forth from your factories, you might be working with another company that's in your supply chain, but they're actually a logistics company. So you might want to go and learn and benchmark from the logistics company, because those guys, that's their business. Their business is to move things around, right? So you could go and learn from them, and then you could apply that to your employee bus service to make it more safer for your employees. Finally, and you would have probably fundamentals 1 to 6 so far that I spoke about. Many of you will be very familiar with. So I'm sorry if I bored you with what I was saying. But this fundamental 7 is really, really important, and it's about the establishment of communities of practice. So studies have really shown from our research in this book that 99 to 95 of the workplace incidents are avoidable, and 80 to 85% are repeatable. So you could have not had that incident in your own context or in your own factory, but somewhere else that would have happened. So if you really are able to learn proactively from internal and external sources through your supply chain, and you are able to create a community of practice, a safe space where you guys can share your issues, your challenges, your problems, your incidents and stuff like that, you can really, really learn a lot. And you create communities of practice. It's very, very important that these communities of practice are cross-functional, they're cross-organizational, that's cross-industrial, and so even like we learned a lot of things in oil and gas from aviation, for example, in safety. Oil and gas has been able to influence, for example, the construction industry and so on and so forth, but also discipline specific. So I worked as I spoke about communities of practice between, for example, safety practitioners, or as the DQG does always, and brings all these practitioners with regards to quality and business excellence. So the learning opportunities are shared, and these best practices, incidents, and maximizing the potential from seeing what others is very, very important. And this can be actually institutionalized and doesn't need to be ad hoc, It can be created and doesn't need to be like a sort of a time-specific project that we're learning from each other only this time. I think it needs to continue. I think in the UAE, what I found is that there are many more informal communities of practice that I've been involved in than institutionalized and established communities of practice. The DQG, and I don't say this because it's just your birthday, I'm saying this really because I truly believe in it. It's been an organization which stood the test of time and has done a lot to improve, and it's a very good platform as a community of practice. So finally, sorry, I've spoken as fast as I can. Some key messages that I want to leave you with, and then we can maybe have a few discussions. Collaboration is key for the future of the industry. Safety can be improved by leveraging on supply chain. Very important to leverage on that. We have to consider both internal organization as well as, industry cross collaboration to improve our safety within the supply chain. When you improve safety, you improve reliability, you improve resilience. Operational excellence can help industries and organizations do this. And as I said, it can help very much impact the bottom line. The future growth and sustainable development, in building and learning from disruptive elements of the modern world should be used really to improve learning, communication, and collaboration. So we can use platforms to actually help us with this disruptive elements. And I also refer to Zainab Sheikh Mohammed's sayings that change or otherwise you shall be changed. And collaboration, and as I said, the communities of practice at the end of my talk are really critical to operation excellence in supply chains because of the nature of how you want to work with operation excellence in the supply chain. You can't do it really without a proper collaboration and by creating. I just wanted to say, because I'm also the only chair of the Energy Institute, is one of the many international organizations, but it's also committed, for example, to energy industry and works on building the body of knowledge, creating collaborations, encouraging and providing platforms for learning and shared best practice. There's also other industry bodies that do this, but Energy Institute is one of them. And in fact, today I've recently been in talks with the Society of Engineers, and they would like me to chair the Association for Professional Engineering. So inshallah, the UAE Society of Engineers will be setting up a professional sort of chartership type of professional engineers accreditation in the near future, inshallah. And we have the honor to work on that with some clever people, inshallah. So we expect an international standard also to be developed within the coming years on international excellence and integrity, because I've seen ISO standards, and again, because the DQG obviously works with a lot of ISO standards. I think that in the near future, I really see that an operational excellence and or an operational integrity standard will be developed in the industry. We don't see one covering that kind of management system. The closest I've seen so far is the integrated management systems. Okay. Thank you for your attention, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that was useful for you, and I'm happy to take any questions if you like.
Thank you, Dr. Waddah. On behalf of the Dubai Quality Group and our chairman, Eng Hassan Omar, I would love to say big thanks to you and your fruitful presentation. Actually, it's full of information and knowledge. It's need more than one webinar to cover all the points that has been highlighted today. We have a verbal question from Mr. Abdul Qadir. Lisa can start talking right now. Mr. Abdul Qadir.
Yeah.
Hello. Mr. Abdul Qadir. Yeah, can you proceed?
Yes, yes. Thank you, Mr. Waddah, for a very lively presentation. Nowadays, people are facing the uncertainty and the risk, especially the non or unpredictable risk. So if a risk is not predictable, it will not go into the register, let's say. What can the organization do for such a type of risk, like the black swan? The event which come rarely, but which can be very, very disastrous. Like this pandemic. Although pandemic, sometimes people can foresee it. So, any thought on this?
Yeah, I think I go back and say that it is through the collaboration. So, if you remember in my presentation, I spoke about the learning. Yeah, many organizations, they might not experience a particular incident. So, for example, we have one refinery. The refinery might have experienced a fire, right? Experienced a fire maybe in the column, or experienced a fire in one of the pumps. Because it hasn't experienced a fire in one of the tanks or in one of the process units, right? So we become, we don't think that, with time, we start thinking as a company that cannot happen to us. So what we do is we generally, if we collaborate with so many other refiners, you would have had incidents that have happened in all parts of the plant, if you look at all the refiners in the world. So the bigger your community practice, the better. So that is in terms of normal incidents or incidents that can happen, which are predictable, maybe less likely, but still plausible. Then you have incidents which are like, as you said, black swan incidents which come through. You can only prepare for them, I think, so much. I think you prepare for them by being actually resilient. Yani, for example, most people who have survived the COVID, a lot of people obviously have lost their lives. If you look at the majority of people who have actually lost their lives, although some people who were, relatively fit and they were okay, didn't have many underlying conditions, they say they still passed away from COVID. But it's actually their internal resilience, because they had that level of immunity to start with, and that immunity actually made them survive the illness. So in the same way, organizations today who have survived the COVID lockdowns and the economic crisis which is related to it, were those who are, had strong competency, were able to be agile, were able to be moving fast into, for example, digitization and moving their meetings, online, were able to work remotely, did not have many big debts. Most of the companies that, that went bankrupt within 2 months, 2-3 months, these were companies that were living with such heavy debt that they couldn't even, after 1 or 2 months of cash flow, their cash flow going down, they couldn't even survive. So that means they carried a lot of debt. So fitness is the most important thing. So the same thing with all organizations. The only suggestion I give is that they should be ready. They should keep themselves fit, financially fit, talent. They should have good talent and good talent fitness. They should have fitness in their systems and processes. They should be agile. They should have good, strong alternative and reliable systems. Yeah.
Okay.
Barakallah.
Excellent.
Very good question.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Waddah.
Thank you. Allah yahfazak. Allah yahfazak. Thank you.
Shukran.
Thank you. Allah khalik. Any other questions?
We don't
Can I
receive
ask
any
one,
questions.
another one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr.
Mr. Waddah, another concern is the fear in the organizations. The psychological fear of speaking your mind, of failing. People.
Yes.
Most of the people are. Because we are talking about quality. First.
Mm-hmm.
First time, right, So people have, of course, when we talk about safety, we have to be resilient, we have to be high reliability system. But in many other domain, people are still, there is the fear to be wrong, there is the fear to fail, there is the fear to look silly if you are asking or trying to understand, or if you are new to a company and you would like to propose some solution, people are feared. They say, it's better if I keep quiet, I will have less problem. So,
yes,
So what's your view on this? How to really help the company overcoming this?
Wallahi, there are 3 ways, sir. One of them, I spoke about leadership, and I told you that leadership needs to encourage innovation, encourage people to speak up. So they need to create that safe haven for people to speak, and in fact encourage it by motivating it through giving recognition and awards for coming up with good suggestions.
Yes.
Some companies, we have an innovation system here in Enoch where if you are able to come up with a certain savings, the employee gets a certain percentage of the savings to encourage them to come up with ideas. These can be safety related as well. The second thing is that when you create a community of practice, you can have that discussion on a particular thing. So, for example, you have an idea about improving the way that the for example, the company transport system works. But you're not sure if you should say it in this organization, and you're not quite sure of the idea and if it's going to work or not. But because you collaborate inside a community of practice, you can always talk to people who might have that experience, and then they'll give you more confidence in your idea. And then you can, when you come up with that idea, you can say, it's not an idea that I should fear, because I think such and such company has implemented this and they did very well. I'm just suggesting, why don't we do something similar? Because there's definitely some saving that we can make, or there's some improvement, safety improvement we can make, or whatever it is. The third thing is very important, that we develop our supervisors and develop our managers in order to create that safe environment. Because at the end of the day, most employees, they don't leave their organization, they leave their line managers. Yes. So if we invest more in line managers, if you want an operationally excellent system, an operational excellence management system in a company, you must take your leaders in that organization, the managers and the supervisors, and actually instill in them as part of your normal leadership development program within that organization to allow people to speak and to actually encourage people to speak and make it safe for them. And because it's a culture, right? I mean, the CEO can write a memo and say, everyone come speak up. But at the end of the day, people will do as they feel.
Yes.
So, you have to create that culture. هذه العقيدة مبنية على ايش اقول لك مبنية على ثقافة موجودة في الشركة.
Yes. Okay. Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
No problem. Anytime. Okay, Ms. Dua, any other questions?
No, thank you. You did today a great job, Dr. Waddah, and thank you so much for giving us this your time and this information. We're grateful for that and for this opportunity, particularly. Inshallah, and the next time we will do more and more webinars to be focusing on each point has been highlighted today in more details, if you don't mind.
No, inshallah, no problem. We're more than happy. We could do one about how leadership drives because I'm very passionate about how it could drive safety and drive excellence within organizations, inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah. Anyway, thank you so much. Thank you for our attendees, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming today and being with us for 1 hour and more. Looking to see you for our upcoming event, especially the virtual Lean Summit that we're gonna organize by next week, inshallah, on Sunday for running on 3 days, starting from 26th and 28th and 30th of July evening, starting from 7 o'clock. Hopefully you will be able to join us. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, inshallah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Alaikum salam.